The late afternoon sun spilled its golden light across the empty road as Malcolm Vetter coasted his bicycle along the quiet neighborhood. His breath was steady, but his chest carried a familiar heaviness, one that never quite went away. The silence around him was almost peaceful, yet something about it made him feel even more alone. 2 years had passed since Daphne died, but time had done little to fill the space she left behind. Riding these roads had become his way of pretending he was going somewhere, even when he wasn't. He passed tidy lawns, white fences, and mailboxes painted with fading names. Nothing ever changed here, but just as he reached the bend near Hawthorne Lane, he caught something out of the corner of his eye. A large dog, standing still behind a waist-high cedar fence. It was a German shepherd, regal and calm, watching him, not barking, not pacing, just watching. Malcolm slowed his bike without thinking, his instincts overtaken by something else. Curiosity, maybe, or memory. He stopped, stepped off his bike, and approached the fence cautiously. The dog leaned forward, resting its front paws on the top plank. Their faces were now just inches apart. Malcolm reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the thick fur beneath the animal's jaw. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, voice soft as if speaking to someone he once knew. The dog didn't pull away. Instead, its deep, amber eyes searched his, like it was trying to say something. That look, it wasn't just attentive. It was familiar, uncomfortably familiar. For a moment, Malcolm forgot where he was. The world slipped away, and in its place came a memory he hadn't touched in decades. A boy's laughter echoing across a sunlit yard, a dog sprinting after a red ball, and a promise made to someone small and trusting. He blinked hard, pushing the image away. "No," he muttered, almost to himself. "That can't be." His hand dropped, and he looked toward the house behind the fence. An older wooden home with faded flower boxes beneath the windows. Nothing out of the ordinary, and yet, something in him shifted. The dog's eyes hadn't left him. There was something knowing in its gaze, something unsettling. It was as if the animal was waiting for him to remember, or perhaps realize, something that had long been buried. His heart began to race, though he didn't know why. He glanced back toward the street, considering riding off, but his feet stayed rooted to the ground. Then the front door of the house creaked open. Malcolm turned toward it, heart caught in his throat. And there, standing in the doorway, was a woman he hadn't seen in almost 40 years. Eleanor Durand. Eleanor Durand didn't speak right away. She stood in the doorway with one hand gripping the frame, her expression unreadable. Time had softened her face, but Malcolm would have recognized her anywhere. The way her silver hair fell over one shoulder, the slight tilt of her chin, none of that had changed. She wore a long cardigan over a plain dress, the kind of outfit that said she wasn't expecting visitors, especially not him. Her eyes flicked briefly to the dog, then back to Malcolm, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Malcolm took a step forward, unsure whether he was drawn by recognition or guilt. "Ellie?" he said, his voice quieter than he intended. Saying her name felt strange, like opening a door that should have stayed closed. She didn't smile, didn't even nod. She just studied him. Her silence wasn't angry, but it wasn't warm either. Felt cautious, tense. And beneath that tension was something heavier, like history pressing between them. I didn't know you lived here," he added stupidly, knowing how it sounded the moment it left his lips. "I moved back 2 years ago," she finally said, her voice calm but flat. "After my sister passed." She stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed, posture guarded. "I didn't expect to see you again." The air between them grew tighter, the weight of their shared past. Whatever had been left unsaid, unresolved, seemed to settle in the space like dust that had never quite been cleaned. The dog, still standing by the fence, turned its head between them, as if sensing something neither one wanted to acknowledge. Malcolm nodded slowly. "I didn't know. I was just riding past. Then I saw the dog." He looked back at the German shepherd, now sitting calmly, watching them with those same piercing eyes. "He looked at me," And for a second, he hesitated. I thought I knew him. Eleanor's face tightened slightly, just enough for Malcolm to notice. She glanced toward the dog again, then back to him. His name's Bruno, she said. He showed up at the shelter a year ago. No tags, no microchip. I took him in. Bruno. The name hit Malcolm like a jolt. Not because it was unusual, but because it wasn't. That name meant something. He'd heard it before. Long ago. In a different house, in a different life. He felt the muscles in his back tense. Was it a coincidence? Or something else? Did he belong to someone you knew? He asked carefully. Eleanor shook her head. Not that I know of. But he's different. Follows me everywhere. Won't let anyone else walk him. I swear sometimes he understands every word I say. She looked at Malcolm more directly now, her tone shifting ever so slightly. Why are you really here? Malcolm didn't answer, because deep down, even he didn't know. Malcolm stood in silence, staring at Bruno as if the dog held the missing pieces to a puzzle he didn't remember starting. The name echoed in his mind, Bruno, not in passing, not as a coincidence, but with a kind of gravity that pulled memories from corners he had long sealed shut. Eleanor turned and walked back toward the porch, not waiting for him. After a moment, Malcolm followed, every step feeling heavier than the last. He stopped at the foot of the stairs. You said his name's Bruno, he murmured, almost afraid to say it too loudly. Yes, Eleanor replied, without turning around. It was the name on the paperwork from the shelter. They gave it to him, but he responded to it right away, like he'd been called that before. She finally looked back at Malcolm, her eyes narrower now. Why does that matter? He hesitated, hands tightening around the handlebars of his bike. Because I used to have a dog named Bruno, he said, his voice cracking on the last word. When Caleb was 10, that's what he named him. Eleanor's posture changed. Slightly, barely, but Malcolm saw it. Like a wave of tension ran through her spine. She looked away quickly, as if hiding something in her expression. You had a German shepherd? She asked, forcing her voice to sound casual. Yes, Malcolm nodded. Exactly like him. Same build, same coat, same eyes. His gaze locked with Bruno's again. The dog didn't flinch, didn't blink. It just stared back, like it had been waiting for this moment too. He disappeared the same summer Caleb did, Malcolm added quietly. The silence between them thickened. Eleanor stepped down from the porch and walked toward the dog, running her hand over the top of his head. Bruno didn't move. You never found him? She asked. Malcolm shook his head. Neither of them. That was the part he never talked about. Not to neighbors, not to family. Daphne used to say silence was the only way he knew how to cope. But even she never pushed too hard. Caleb's disappearance had hollowed him out. And Bruno had vanished just days later, as if the dog had followed the boy into the void. Eleanor's hand stilled on Bruno's back. Malcolm, she said, her voice now barely above a whisper. When he showed up at the shelter, he was wearing a collar. No tag, just a small leather loop stitched with thread. In blue. Malcolm felt the blood drain from his face. He remembered that collar. Caleb had insisted on blue thread because Bruno was a boy, not a baby. It was childish logic, but the kind of thing a 10-year-old would proudly defend. And now, decades later, it was back, in Eleanor's yard on this dog. How long has he been with you? Malcolm asked, his voice hoarse. Eleanor looked up. Exactly 1 year, she said. To the day Caleb disappeared. The world around Malcolm seemed to blur as Eleanor's words settled in his mind. 1 year. To the day Caleb disappeared. He stood still, as if motion might shatter the fragile memory trying to claw its way to the surface. That summer had always been a closed door in his mind. One he had locked and bolted from the inside. Now that door was beginning to crack, and behind it, something waited. Are you sure about the date? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. I didn't think it meant anything, Eleanor said softly, until just now. She kept her hand on Bruno, grounding herself. I marked it because it was the anniversary of my sister's death. I thought, maybe I was just vulnerable. That's why I took him home. But then he started doing these things, pacing near the window at exactly 8:17 every night, barking at the back gate even when there was nothing there, like he was remembering something. She looked at Malcolm. It scared me. Malcolm's mouth felt dry. He stepped back, reaching instinctively for his bike, needing something to hold on to. Caleb disappeared on July 3rd, he said. We were out in the yard. He was playing with Bruno. I went inside to grab lemonade. I was gone 5 minutes, maybe less. His voice faltered. When I came back, he was gone. No sign, no noise, no scream, just gone. And Bruno too. He had told that story 100 times, but never like this. This time, it didn't feel like reciting, it felt like confession. Eleanor looked down, her expression shifting. Guilt, fear, something else. I didn't tell you everything, she said. Back then, her voice trembled. I saw Caleb that day. Malcolm froze. What? I was walking home from the market. I passed the woods behind your house. Caleb was near the edge of the trees, holding Bruno's leash. He looked back at me, then walked into the woods. I thought he was just playing. I didn't think anything of it. She paused, shame blooming in her face. I should have said something. I should have told you. Malcolm stared at her, stunned. Why didn't you? She hesitated. Because you and Daphne were already falling apart. I thought adding guilt wouldn't help. And I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just a different kid. But now, she looked at Bruno, who had moved to sit between them, ears alert. Now I'm not so sure. A long silence followed, broken only by the wind rustling the dry leaves along the fence. Malcolm knelt beside Bruno, looking into those impossibly knowing eyes again. Where did you go? He whispered. What did you see? Bruno blinked once, slowly, then turned his head toward the trees. That night, Malcolm couldn't sleep. The shadows of the room felt heavier than usual, the silence somehow louder. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying Eleanor's words over and over. Caleb walked into the woods. He had avoided those woods for years, letting the grass overgrow the trail behind his old house, pretending it was just part of nature reclaiming space. But now it felt like something had been waiting there all along. Not just answers, but the truth he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. The next morning, Malcolm stood at the edge of the woods. He hadn't been back since the day Caleb disappeared. The trees looked the same, tall, close together, branches tangled like fingers hiding secrets. Bruno stood beside him, alert but calm, as if he recognized the place. You remember this, don't you? Malcolm said quietly, resting a hand on the dog's back. Bruno didn't respond, but his eyes were fixed on the path ahead. For a moment, Malcolm hesitated. The weight of memory, of guilt, nearly stopped him. But then Bruno stepped forward. They moved slowly through the brush, following a barely visible trail. Dry twigs snapped under their feet, birds scattered in the distance. The deeper they went, the more Malcolm felt time folding in on itself. Flashes came in fragments. A red ball bouncing, Caleb's laugh echoing, the sliver of a blue collar glinting in sunlight. He didn't know if they were memories or inventions, but they felt real enough to hurt. Bruno stopped suddenly at a bend in the trail, ears perked. Malcolm followed the dog's gaze. Just beyond the trees stood the remains of an old hunting shed. The wood was rotted, roof partially collapsed, half covered by vines. Malcolm's breath caught. He remembered this place, though he hadn't thought of it in years. As a teenager, he and his brother had hidden out here, sneaking cigarettes and telling ghost stories. He had no idea it was still standing. Bruno approached it cautiously, nose close to the ground. Malcolm followed, heart pounding. Inside, the air was musty, the smell of wet leaves and decay thick. But something was off. On the floor, half buried in dirt and debris, was a small, rusted flashlight. Malcolm crouched down and picked it up. The plastic casing was cracked, and on the bottom was a faded sticker, property of Caleb V. His chest tightened. This wasn't a random place. Caleb had been here. He had made it this far. But then what? Bruno growled, low and steady. Malcolm looked up, following the dog's stare toward the back wall. There, carved faintly into the wood, were 3 letters. DV. Malcolm stared at the letters etched into the wall. DV. They were faint, almost erased by time and weather, but unmistakably deliberate. His heart pounded. He hadn't seen those initials in decades, but the moment he did, a memory came back like a slap. Caleb scribbling his full name into the back of a comic book. Daniel Caleb Vetter, he'd said proudly, explaining he liked the sound of DV because it sounded like a superhero. Malcolm had forgotten that, or maybe he had tried to. Bruno sat beside him, tail still, eyes fixed on the carving like he understood its meaning. Malcolm ran his fingers over the letters. They felt fresh, too fresh to have been here for 30 years. Could someone have come back? Could Caleb? But that thought was ridiculous. Or was it? What if he hadn't died? What if he hadn't been taken? What if he had run? And if he had... Why carve his initials here again after all these years? Unless it wasn't him. Unless someone else left it as a message. Malcolm backed out of the shed, his legs shaky. The sunlight filtering through the trees now felt harsher, colder. As he stepped into the clearing, his mind reeled. There had always been theories. Police had searched for months, convinced Caleb had been lured away. Neighbors whispered about strangers in town. But there had been no proof, no witnesses. Just a vanished boy and a dog that disappeared with him. And now here was that same dog, alive and older, standing in front of him like a living question. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the carving. Then, against every instinct, he called someone he hadn't spoken to in years, Martin Doyle, his old neighbor. Martin had been in his 20s back then, a loner, lived 2 houses down. Odd but harmless, everyone had said. But Malcolm remembered something Eleanor once mentioned, a moment she had brushed off as unimportant. That Martin had worked part-time for a logging company and used to camp near these woods. Maybe it was nothing, but maybe it wasn't. After a few rings, the call went to voicemail. Malcolm left a brief message. Martin, it's Malcolm Vetter. We need to talk. It's about the summer of '93. And Caleb. He hung up and slipped the phone back in his pocket, trying to ignore how fast his heart was beating. When he turned back to Bruno, the dog was standing perfectly still, staring toward the trees again, toward a different path, slightly overgrown, barely visible. Is that where we go next? Malcolm whispered. Bruno didn't move but didn't look away. And something in Malcolm knew. They were just beginning to uncover the truth. The trail Bruno had locked his gaze on was narrow and covered in thick underbrush, as if nature itself had tried to erase it. Malcolm hesitated before stepping forward, the crunch of dry twigs beneath his boots sounding too loud in the quiet. Bruno followed without hesitation, moving ahead like he'd walked this route 100 times. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to close in, every step feeling like a descent into something older, something buried. For nearly 10 minutes, they walked in silence. Then Malcolm saw it, a clearing smaller than the last, and tucked between a circle of tall pine trees. At its center stood a collapsed wire fence, rusted and tangled, surrounding what looked like the remains of an old campsite. A fire pit still held the shape of stone, though overgrown with moss. An old lantern lay on its side. It wasn't just abandoned. It looked like it had been left in a hurry. Malcolm's breath caught as he knelt and brushed away leaves from a small, moldy cloth backpack. The initials stitched in fading thread. CV. He swallowed hard. Caleb? The pack was too weathered to be recent. It must have been here for years. But that meant Caleb had made it here. On his own. With Bruno. Maybe he'd hidden out. Maybe he'd been hiding from something. But then, why had he never come back? Malcolm opened the bag with shaking hands. Inside was a sketch pad, its pages yellowed with age. On the first page, a drawing. A boy holding the leash of a German shepherd. Both were smiling. Malcolm sat down slowly, the weight of the years pressing on his shoulders. He flipped through more pages, drawings of trees, of the shed, of the woods. Some were childlike, others more detailed. and then one stopped him cold. It was a face drawn over and over on the same page. A man with a crooked nose and a wide jaw. Beneath the sketches, in shaky, uneven letters, "Don't let him find me." Malcolm's chest tightened. He knew that face. It was Martin Doyle. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A voicemail. Malcolm put the sketchpad down and pressed play. Martin's voice came through, slow and unsure. "Malcolm, I didn't think you'd ever call. I figured maybe someday you'd find that place. I didn't mean for things to go that far." Caleb was scared. "I only tried to." The message cut off. Malcolm stared at the screen, numb. Every instinct told him this wasn't over. It never had been. Bruno let out a low, almost mournful whine. Malcolm looked up and saw someone standing at the edge of the clearing. Malcolm froze. The figure at the edge of the clearing didn't move, standing partially hidden by the trees, face obscured by shadow. Bruno let out a low growl, not aggressive, but protective. Malcolm rose slowly, the sketchpad still in his hand, heart hammering against his ribs. "Hello," he called, his voice trembling more than he expected. The figure stepped forward, slowly. A man, mid-30s, dressed simply. Jeans, gray flannel, a worn cap. His posture was tense, guarded. But his eyes, Malcolm's breath caught in his throat. He knew those eyes, blue-green, just like Daphne's. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The man looked older, weathered, with a short beard and a wary expression. But there was no doubt. "Caleb." Malcolm's voice cracked on the name. The man stopped, jaw tightening, eyes wide. "Don't," he said softly. "Please. I didn't come to be found." Malcolm took a step forward. "It is you." His knees felt weak. "I thought you were gone. I thought you were dead." Caleb looked down, hands tucked into his pockets. "I almost was." His voice was deeper now, quieter. "But I couldn't come back. Not after what happened. Not after what I saw." Malcolm stood frozen, emotions crashing into each other. Relief, confusion, sorrow, guilt. "You were a child," he said. "Whatever happened, we could have helped you." Caleb shook his head. "You don't understand. You never knew. You and Mom were always so busy arguing, pretending like things were fine. But they weren't. Not with him." "Him?" Malcolm asked, heart sinking. "Martin," Caleb said, voice like a blade. "He followed me into the woods that day, tried to scare me. I ran, hid in the shed. Bruno stayed with me. I heard Martin looking for me, calling me. He said things, awful things. I didn't come out. I waited until night. I thought maybe if I stayed hidden, he'd leave." He paused, swallowing hard. But he never did. I saw him again weeks later. And again. He watched from a distance. I knew he'd tell you I was alive. And I was too afraid of what would happen if I went home. Malcolm's eyes stung. "Caleb, we thought we lost you. Your mother. She died thinking you were gone forever." Caleb looked away, pain flashing across his face. "I know. I watched the funeral. From the trees. I saw her. I wanted to run to her, but I couldn't. I was too far gone. I'd been living like a ghost for so long. I didn't know how to stop." Bruno walked toward Caleb and sat beside him, tail thumping once against the ground. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's head. "He never left me. Not once." Malcolm's knees buckled, and he sank to the ground, overcome. His son had never truly been gone, but something had been broken, and they were only beginning to face it. They sat in silence for a long time. Caleb on a fallen log, Malcolm on the dirt beside him. Bruno rested between them, a living bridge across 3 decades of distance. The forest no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt like a room long sealed off, heavy with dust, but holding pieces of a life that had never truly been lost. Malcolm's mind reeled, trying to grasp the image of the boy he once knew inside the man now sitting quietly beside him. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a reckoning. "I used to blame myself," Malcolm said finally, voice barely above a whisper, "for letting you out of my sight. for not hearing you call, for not finding you." He paused. "But the truth is, I think I blamed you too, for disappearing, for leaving your mother and me in the dark." Caleb nodded slowly, not in agreement, but in understanding. "I know," he said. "I blamed you too, for not noticing, for not listening, for making everything feel like it had to be perfect all the time." Malcolm turned to look at him. "We thought we were doing our best, and I thought I had to disappear to survive," Caleb replied. "I wasn't trying to punish you. I was just scared of Martin, of coming back and not being believed, of being told it was all in my head." He glanced down at Bruno. "He was the only one I trusted. He kept me alive more than once, even when I stopped caring if I lived." The words cut deep, but Malcolm didn't interrupt. He knew now that silence had cost more than any words ever could. A breeze moved gently through the clearing, stirring the leaves. "So where did you go?" Malcolm asked. "After the woods?" Caleb sighed. "I moved around, found odd jobs, stayed invisible. I never used my full name. Eventually I found work with a wildlife conservancy. That's how I found Bruno again." Malcolm blinked. "You lost him?" Caleb nodded. "He was gone for almost a year. I figured it was over. But then I saw his picture on a shelter's bulletin board in a gas station last year. Right here. I came back to get him and couldn't leave." Malcolm looked around at the trees, the place where so much had gone wrong, and yet also the place where something long buried had begun to heal. "You don't have to disappear again," he said gently. "Not this time." Caleb hesitated. "I'm not sure I know how to come back." His voice was raw. "I don't know who I am out there anymore." Malcolm nodded slowly, his voice firm. "Then let's figure it out. Together." Bruno stood suddenly, ears perked, as if sensing a shift, and behind them, the sound of tires on gravel cut through the silence. Someone else was coming. The sound of tires crunching over gravel grew louder, drawing both Malcolm and Caleb to their feet. Bruno stayed close, alert but calm. A moment later, a familiar car emerged between the trees. An old blue sedan that Malcolm instantly recognized. The driver's door opened, and Eleanor stepped out, her eyes widening when she saw the two of them standing together. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she walked slowly forward, her hand covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "Caleb," she whispered. "I don't believe it." He managed a small, hesitant smile. "Hey, Ellie." Malcolm turned to his son, surprised. "You remember her?" Caleb nodded. "She used to sneak me cookies when I came over with Mom. I never forgot." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "You were always too quiet for your own good." The air between them softened. What had once been a place of fear and silence was now filled with warmth, recognition, and forgiveness. Back at Eleanor's house, they sat on the porch like old friends, slowly rediscovering each other. Caleb held a cup of coffee with both hands, staring out at the yard while Bruno lay stretched at his feet. The air was still, safe. "You don't have to decide everything now," Eleanor said gently. "Stay for a while. Let things settle." Malcolm nodded in agreement. "There's no rush, no expectations. Just start with today." Caleb glanced between them, his face etched with hesitation, but something inside him had softened. Later that evening, as the sun began to sink behind the trees, Malcolm stood in the yard, looking at the sky turning orange and purple. Caleb stepped beside him, holding the old sketch pad. "There's one more thing I want you to have," he said, handing it over. Malcolm flipped through the pages slowly, stopping at a final drawing he hadn't seen before. It showed a man and a boy, older now, walking side by side, a dog between them. No names, no words, just them, together. Malcolm blinked hard. "You drew this recently?" Caleb nodded. "Last week. I didn't know why. Just felt like I needed to." He hesitated. "I didn't know if I believed in second chances. I still don't. But I think I believe in moments. And this feels like one." Malcolm put an arm around his son's shoulders, and for the first time in over 30 years, the distance between them truly began to disappear. As night fell, the three of them, Malcolm, Caleb, and Bruno, sat quietly on the porch. No grand words, no need, just the quiet comfort of belonging again. And after a lifetime of searching, Malcolm finally understood. Sometimes coming home isn't about a place. It's about who's waiting when you get there.